All right, in this video, I'll be demonstrating some basics of using the pen tools in Illustrator that you will be needing to draw your custom type logo based on your own illustrations. To start, I'm going to actually demonstrate the basics of drawing with the pen tool in Illustrator, and then I'm going to bring in a sample image and demonstrate how we can draw it. So the pen tool itself is located in the control panel. And what I'm going to do as I'm working with it, I'm actually going to pull it out. If I hold down, I get the options. On the far right, if I click on that little arrow, it's going to allow me to pull out the pen tool to draw with it. The pen tool has four basic functions. Your primary drawing version, which is the pen tool. There's the add an anchor point, which allows us to add anchor points as we're drawing. Delete anchor points, which allows us to delete anchor points to any stroke or line segment we're drawing. And then the actual anchor point tool, which allows us to manipulate and adjust Bezier handles. When we're drawing with the pen tool, I'm going to switch to a different color as I'm drawing. There we are. Like all shapes in Illustrator, we can draw a fill and we can draw a line or a stroke. I'm going to do these basics using a pen tool that has a fill applied to it. The pen tool works by creating a shape as you draw your way around. And if you're just clicking, it can create a straight line to a straight line. And you'll notice that as I get close back to the original anchor point, you can see that the little icon next to my pen tool changes to having a circle. That means that I'm about to close the path. Whenever you're drawing with a pen tool or a line tool or any of the tools in Illustrator, it's always generally considered a good idea to always close a path fully. An open path can potentially have issues and problems when printing. So drawing any kind of shape, click, 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 allows us to draw a straight line from anchor point to anchor point. If I want to draw a more complex shape with curves, then as I'm drawing, what I will do is I'll actually click and drag to create Bezier handles. Bezier handles are what dictates the nature and the shape of the curve in the object that we're drawing in Illustrator. And you can see there, I started drawing a bit of a rounded shape. If I wanted to draw a more perfectly rounded shape, obviously I could use the actual ellipse tool. The pen tool is better when you're making more free-form shapes that aren't as easy to draw using the shape tools. So you can see I can draw a more free-form shape as it is easy to draw. Now once a shape is drawn, it might not be perfect, and that's where using the additional tools allows for a little bit of extra editability. In this case, my Bezier handle over here leaves this side feeling a little flatter than this side. I can use the anchor point tool to select those Bezier handles and adjust them. I can also do the same by switching and selecting the white arrow or the direct selection tool. I can select that anchor point and adjust it and tweak it as needed be. I can also select the actual Bezier handles and adjust them as needed be. It allows for a much greater and precise form of editing. And I often recommend to new students, don't worry about drawing your shape perfect the first time. Get the generic shape under control, and then use the tools that we have at hand to fine-tune it to make it into a much more precision shape. We can use the anchor point tool to change those Bezier handles as needed be. Command Z undoes what we've just did. And if we needed to add additional anchor points to change the shape, we can do so with the Add Anchor Point tool. All you have to do is select anywhere on the path and click to add an anchor points. And it'll allow me to add additional anchor points anywhere on the path. I can then select those anchor points and manipulate them using the white or direct selection tools and the pen tool is needed B. If you're drawing with a Bezier handle and you need to change the direction, you can select the anchor, select the Bezier handle, and hold down Option to break the link between both sides of the Bezier handle. Normally, if I'm just selecting it with the direct selection tool, both Bezier handles will move at the same time they're connected. But if I select the Bezier handle, hold down Option, and you'll notice I get that little plus that appears. I can click, drag, and release, and I can break where the Bezier handles are connected, allowing both of them to move independently from one another. The drawing with shapes is relatively easy. It just takes time and practice and practice to get really good with using the pen tool in the way that we want to use it. My experience, most people approach drawing in Illustrator think that it's just a matter of clicking and dragging. That's what actually does, what happens when you use either the paintbrush tool or the pencil tool. Where's the pencil tool? It's hidden in here. You can click and drag with those tools in Illustrator, but you'll notice it's still just creating a line segment that is composed of multiple anchor points made of Bezier handles. We use the pen tool to allow us to create precise objects and shapes that are much more easy to edit and manipulate. Let's take a look at how we can use a scan of artwork placed into Illustrator to trace it to create our logo. So I'm going to place a scan that I've already made into Illustrator to use as a logo, so I can go File, Place, and I'm going to navigate to where I have my scan saved. Here. There we are. I'm going to select my scan. I'm going to hit place and bring it into my artboard. Now it's brought it as an image, and I can see there on my layer it is an image. I'm just going to take a moment and rename that layer as my scan template. And I'm going to lock that layer. That'll prevent me from drawing directly on the object, and I can draw as a separate layer. I'm going to use the pen tools now to draw these shapes. I'm going to start with the letter P. The reason why is because the P itself has an open counter. That's what we call, or it has a counter. Well, it's a closed counter technically. A counter is an enclosed area that's open on a letter form. Think of it almost kind of like the center of a donut. This part here would be what we would know as a counter. And in order to draw it, we have to draw two shapes. The outside shape of the letter P, and then the inside shape of the letter P. And we're going to use the pathfinder tool to cut out that center portion. I'm going to draw with my pen tool. And as I draw this time, rather than having a fill applied, I'm going to switch it and have just a stroke applied. And that way then I can see just where I'm drawing and not actually have the fill be filling in as I'm drawing. I like to start usually somewhere where there's a bit of a straight flat edge. So I'm going to start at the top here, and I'm going to pull a Bezier handle right from the get-go so I can start creating a bit of a smooth curve. In my opinion, the key to getting nice curves is by not having your Bezier handles extend too far, and by not having a lot of anchor points. The more anchor points you have, the harder it is to actually edit your image. I'm just going to work my way around. Now here I'm going to have I want to have my anchor point Bezier handles change direction. So I'm going to pull out my Bezier handle with my mouse still clicked down. I'm going to hold down Option, which allows me to change the direction of my Bezier handle. We took a look at how to do that in our lesson that we had in class. I'll do the same here again. Holding down my click, Option, change direction. I'm not worrying about this being perfect at the moment because I can always go back with my selection tools, my pen tool, the white arrow, and clean up any of the anchor points or the Bezier handles that are a little bit unsmooth. So I've got a basic shape, as you can see. I turn off my template layer. It is a little bit rough, so I'm going to clean it up a bit. I'm going to select these two anchor points and pull them over. I want to try and have a nice smooth line. And I'm going to do the same with these anchor points. I want to try and align all these anchor points together. So I can select multiple anchor points at the same time. I can adjust those Bezier handles. I'm just trying to set my letter up so it has a much more cleaner edge. Shift click to select multiple objects, multiple anchor points. I'm just trying to get the edges a little nicer looking. This sometimes just takes an eye for being able to recognize the widths are consistent. There we go. It's a little cleaner, a little nicer. I'll probably have to fine tune it as I go, depending on how it looks once it's actually being drawn in. The template is merely a guide to give us an idea of what the shape is that I've drawn. I don't want anyone feeling like they're set in stone, they have to duplicate it exactly. There is going to be changes as you draw, depending on whether or not you feel the object could look a little bit better if it was a little thicker or a little narrower. So you can see I've adjusted mine a little bit. I'm using that template just literally as a guide, but I am changing it a little bit along the way. All right. If I were to fill this with color now, I'm going to add a color fill using my swatch panel. That counter, that open spot in the center of the P is not there. So I want to fill that. I want to actually create that. In order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw another shape in the shape of the counter, and I'm going to use the pathfinder tool to cut that new shape out of the other shape. So temporarily I'm turning off the first shape that I did, visibility. In the layers panel, I've clicked on the eyeball to turn it off, and I'm actually going to lock it as well. That prevents any possibility of accidentally selecting on that shape and editing it. I'm going to draw my counter now. Command Z, I'm going to turn off the fill so I don't do that. There we are. Just going to slowly work my way around, trying to make not too many anchor points so that my shape's easy to edit. There we go. With my shape drawn, I'm going to turn back on the first shape and I'm going to turn off the template layer. And what I'm going to do is, in order to properly visualize how that counter looks, because I want to just fix it up a little, I'm going to set the fill on my second shape to white. And that'll help to simulate what it's going to look like with it cut out. It's not actually cut out yet. You can see if I turn on that scan, the center is not actually cut out. I'm just using the white to help simulate what it looks like. And this allows me then a little bit easier to go in with my pen tool and my selectors, just to fine tune this shape to make it look a little nicer. I'm going to make my stroke a little thicker on this side. Just adjusting these anchors to have a nicer, smoother curve. I'm trying to make it so it looks nice and smooth as it transitions from there to there. And sometimes this can be quite finicky, very fiddly. It just takes time and practice to get good at knowing how much or how little is needed. Yeah, looking a little bit better. Almost feels a little too thin in there, but I'm going to fix that by adjusting that bottom line because this line does look like it has a nice transition. All right, I'm going to temporarily change my fill to another color now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock my original shape. This will allow me to select it. I'm going to use that top shape to cut a hole through the bottom shape. I'm going to select them both. And in the first video, I showed how you can use the effect pathfinder crop to crop an object based on its top shape. This time we're actually going to use the other tools, but we're going to use a different version of the pathfinder tool. There's actually two versions. There's one that's under the effects, which creates live editable versions of the effects. And then if we go Window, Pathfinder, we get a similar tool panel. The difference between the two is these are permanent effects, meaning that once we've done it, it's permanently set and we can move on and keep working. In this case, I'm going to use the minus front. And you'll notice if you hover all the tools, it tells you what they're going to do. Unite merges objects together. Minus front cuts one object from another, the front object from the back object. Intersect cuts away everything that's not overlapping. Exclude cuts away everything that is overlapping. Divide breaks all the shapes apart into individual elements. Trim, merge, and so on, all function to allow us to break apart shapes. We're going to focus on the basic ones today, and this one we're actually going to use is the minus front. So with both the objects selected, I'm going to click on minus front, and it's going to cut the front object out of the back object. And you can see now that counter is nicely cut out. That allows me then to go back in, and if needed be, I can adjust and tweak that bottom shape like I was mentioning. I'm going to demonstrate quickly what happened or what the other tools do just using some basic shapes. So I'm going to draw a couple shapes here so I can demonstrate what some of those Pathfinder tools do. So I've got two shapes overlapping each other. Let me demonstrate how the Pathfinder tools work. I'm going to select them both. Merge, or unite, merges them into one shape. So if you had a lot of smaller shapes that you're making to create up your letter forms, unite will combine them all together into one complex shape. Minus front cuts the front shape out of the back shape. This tool I find is very handy if you're making letter forms and you want to have nice smooth curves. You can start with the ellipse tool, make a nice smooth curve, cut one shape out of the other shape, and it's a lot easier drawing a curve this way sometimes than drawing with the pen tool. Intersect cuts away everything that's not overlapping each other. Exclude does the opposite. It cuts away everything that is overlapping each other. We could have used exclude as well to punch out that hole in the counter. Divide breaks our object up into three separate shapes, but you'll notice when I use it, they stay grouped. So we actually have to ungroup them. Object, ungroup. And then we can take those three shapes and use them however we want. Trim will cut the one shape from the other. We have to ungroup it again. Command-Shift-G. Merge does the same thing. It's going to merge them together. Crop, just like that other crop tool, crops everything away except for what's overlapping. Outline produces outlines that have kind of oddly shaped widths on them. This tool actually, I'm going to fully tell you right now, I have looked it up online and I've never really been able to see exactly why it does it this way, other than it used to be used, I believe, when we were doing trapping, which is a printing technique that we're not going to be learning this term because it's a little more advanced than we need to know. But that's the basic Pathfinder functionality, and you can see how it can easily be used in combination with our pen tool. I'll actually demonstrate right now. Let's say if I was making this C and I wanted to start out with a nice smooth curve, I could use an ellipse. I'll draw my C shape. So I'm going to make it approximate about the same size as the C. I'll temporarily turn that off. I'm going to make a smaller C shape. That'll be my inside. I could draw this with a pen, but this is going to guarantee I'm going to have much nicer, smoother edges. And I'm going to use one more shape. I'm drawing a rectangle. That's going to allow me to create a hole here. Now, it doesn't look at all like my C. Watch how I'm going to use these three shapes to make that C. Once again, I could easily do this using the pen tool, but sometimes it's a lot easier to make a nice smooth curve by starting with a perfect curved circle to begin with. I've layered these over top of each other. I've got my rectangle, my ellipse, and my other ellipse. I'm going to select them all. And this time what I'm going to use is I'm going to use the divide tool. Because I've got multiple objects, if I just do minus front, oh, actually it's going to do that. I thought I'd just take away the top one. I could also use the divide tool, ungroup them, and I can get rid of the pieces that I don't need to make that shape. But as I just showed, I can also use, I didn't think this would work this way, the minus front to cut away the front. Now, it's not a perfect circle, it's not a perfect shape yet, because you'll notice that I have this nice teardrop kind of rounded shape on the corner of my C up here. One of the tools that's available to us in Illustrator is that if you select a corner anchor point with the direct selection of white arrow, you'll notice these little circles appear. These are the live corner shape tools. And what I can actually do is select the individual anchor points and pull those live shape tools to round out those corners. This won't work on an actual square corner, or sorry, on an already rounded corner that has too much of a circular shape to it. But the sharper the corner is, the easier it is for us to use those tools. Now that I've got that shape, if need be, I can adjust these anchor points a little. You can see very quickly I've made that C shape by using other shapes and breaking them apart. I can duplicate that. So I've got my two C's. I could do the same with the O. I could use an existing ellipse. Rotate it a little. Make it a little wider. Put a second one in the center. It's about the right size of the center. angle it a little more as well. And then just like I did the first time, select the two, minus front, and it allows me to draw a little more of a stylized shape quicker. To make this swoosh, that I will use the pen tool to create. Because it's easier to do this with the pen tool than with a shape. I'll adjust that. Let's get my curves looking a little nicer there. Bring it over. And now you can see I'm using a combination of the two together. To create this L, I think it'd be easier to use the pen tool. I'm going to make hard corners here so I can demonstrate using that live shape tool again. Bring my L down. Draw out my Bezier handles. Option to change the angle. Option to change the angle. Come up. Now I can switch to my white arrow, adjust this as needed be to make it look a little nicer. I use that live shape tool up here. Using my white selection arrow to select those corners. Here I can do the opposite on the outside to make a nice smooth curve. I'll select both corners at the same time and do it on them. And then mostly it comes down to trusting your eye as you're drawing. Just keeping a good eye on how thick and how thin your stroke weights are. You want to have consistency with your letter form shape and widths. That almost feels a little too thin there. Bring that up a bit. This anchor point here I'm not liking. It's causing problems and it's not needed. So I can actually use my remove an anchor point to get rid of it. There we are. So as you can see, using a combination of the pen tools and the shape tools and the pathfinder tools, it's pretty easy to very quickly start creating your letters. And once you have your letters created, you can go back in and you can fine tune the edges of the shapes to make them easier to use.